One nuclear weapon.
Swedish government reiterates commitments towards its bilateral relations with Nigeria. Ethiopian government says it is committed to peaceful solutions to the conflict in Tigray region. Also, study establishes the fact that majority of South African population have COVID-19 antibodies. Welcome to Global Update, that program that brings you up to speed with different issues around the globe. My name is Oyeyemi Ajayi. Welcome to the program. Swedish ambassador to Nigeria, Grants Carl Michael, says relations between Sweden and Nigeria has continued to grow, highlighting education technology in some Nigerian schools as a major breakthrough in the relationship. He said both countries are working to boost trade relations between them beyond what it is presently. 10th of June 2022, Global Wisdom Consult hosted a certification ceremony for the first digital entrepreneurs graduating from the Digital Entrepreneurship Program at the Bayes University in Abuja. Global Wisdom Consult is a Swedish-Nigerian social enterprise that strives to pass the light of digital literacy to youths through modern ways of learning.
Pretty much say that without this, I would have not been able to even pass through the first test. So that's just my own personal experience. And also, even in the businesses I started online and the businesses I had prior, that I now use the tools that we were taught in this program to improve on, I would have not been able to do them without this course.
It's so wonderful, and we are privileged that Bayes University could give us this opportunity with Global Wisdom Consult to be able to improve Nigeria.
Also give our students opportunity for skill enhancement in particular, so that they can be able to perform as expected in their chosen business.
The event was also attended by the Swedish ambassador to Nigeria, Carl Michael Grants, and he has been the supporter of the project since it started.
We try to facilitate cooperations in different ways between Nigerians and the Swedish people. So we stayed in close contacts with both the University of Bayes and the company itself, and this is the very first fruit, I think, of this cooperation. But there will be more, I'm sure.
We're working hand in glove together with the NUC. So hopefully before the end of the year we can be implemented in some federal universities to test run for a few years and see how we can actually control and manage the amount of students. Because one challenge that we'll look in the federal universities is the population of the students. So we're looking to see how we can manage it in the first few years and increase capacity to manage over 204 universities.
With this, history can be said to be made, as Global Wisdom Consult and Bayes University are looking forward to kick-starting the next semester with new students and continue to work with these students on other projects to ensure the increase of digital literacy. Now, elsewhere in the United Nations, human rights experts has voiced concerns over violence against protesters in Sudan.
This is the second visit by Adama Ding to Sudan since he was appointed a special expert by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in November 2021. He met with Sudan Sovereign Council, politicians, civil society and diplomats to follow up on outcomes from recommendations he made in his previous visit in February.
I flagged my deep concern at the human rights violations documented since the coup. It is simply unacceptable that 99 people have been killed and more than 5,000 injured as a result of excessive use of force by the joint security forces responding to protests. I also raised my concern at the arbitrary and mass arrest and often incommunicado detention of resistance committee members, protesters, activists, media professionals, and others in the context of protests.
Deng is expected to prepare a report for a meeting on Sudan on June 15, during the 50th session on the Human Rights Council. So far, the military leaders have lifted the country's state of emergency in an effort to build trust with civilians. But violence against protesters reared its ugly head again last week. The death toll, according to officials, has reached 100 protesters since the coup.
As long as the same generals are on the scene, nothing will change. We need transitional justice for the killings of the protesters and human rights violations. The political compromise is not always working.
Independent analysts like Usman Mirgani argue that justice is the first step to stability.
The transitional justice and human rights are important issues to support the political instability in Sudan. The laws of the Commission of Transitional Justice were all set, but the institutions are yet to be formed. I think it should be a top priority for stakeholders if they want a long-lasting solution.
Sudan has been given a 2-week deadline to solve its political crisis, failure to which international aid will not be restored.
Direct talks between military and civilian leaders are expected to start this week, after 7 months of dispute. Many Sudanese people are hoping the talks will pave the way for a sustainable political solution.
We're now still talking about Sudan. The country's military-civilian parties have held direct talks to solve months-long political crisis. And one agreed message is the need for peaceful coexistence in the country.
Talks to end Sudan's political crisis are underway, but there is concern about what they can achieve.
The talks were incomplete as the main opposition groups were absent. Talks should be held between the two opponents, like the generals and the former civilian leaders. These talks will not lead to a solution for the political crisis.
The Governing Sovereign Council has launched a mechanism to convince those who refuse to join the talks. It consists of prominent politicians, religion men, and civil society leaders.
The path for solving this crisis is still unclear. While some parties, like the Democratic Union and the Popular Congress parties, agreed to enroll in the UN-sponsored talks, others are skeptical and announced the boycotts of the ongoing dialogue.
These groups include Freedom and Change Forces, the Sudanese Professionals Association, and the Resistance Committee. They have backed the protests against the former President Omar al-Bashir and the recent military takeover.
The powers that have boycotted the dialogue want to impose new dictatorship. There is no solution without discussions. Clinging to the slogan of no negotiation, no partnership, no legitimacy will lead to a deadlock.
Sudan has been in turmoil since October, when the military seized power and suspended the transitional agreement signed after the ouster of the former leader al-Bashir. About 100 people have been killed in protests against the military since October, according to the Sudanese Medics Group. Pro-democracy groups and main opposition leaders say there is a lack of assurances that an agreement with the army can last this time.
Now, the World Food Programme is scaling up food purchase in South Sudan to support local farmers.
The residents of Renk are mainly farmers. The area hosts more than 150,000 people, according to the United Nations World Food Programme. Simsim, maize, sorghum are the main crops grown here. In 2021, farmers in Renk produced and sold 23 metric tons of surplus sorghum to WFP for $8 million.
The local purchase is very beneficiary for us as a business people or for this community. The benefit comes from we are getting the hard currency in the first, When we get the hard currency, we can import the machinery for the agriculture.
Since the country's 2018 peace deal, Reng Town, which borders Sudan, has enjoyed relative peace. Many who had fled the 6-year violence prior to the peace accord have now returned to their own homes, and agriculture is providing the jobs that they desperately need to rebuild their lives.
Last year I was a student.
Last year I was a student. I completed my secondary school certificate, but I didn't want to sit at home and do nothing. So I came here to help my family.
The purchase of food by the WFP is also providing opportunities for other businesses.
When the non-governmental organizations are buying from farmers, there are drivers, porters and other business people. There are hundreds of people who come and buy food, and we are happy to sell to them.
May, June and July are what aid agencies call the lean season, the time when farmers are preparing for cultivation, and many of them can only secure a meal a day for themselves or none at all. The UN and South Sudan's government say more than 60% of the country's 13 million population is currently facing acute food shortage. However, these plays provide hope that South Sudan's food security problem can be resolved locally with the right infrastructure in place. South Sudan's government says it has designated 1.5 million hectares of land in Reng for agriculture. Already, about 500,000 hectares are being cultivated.
WFP is saving some of the transport costs that we will not incur if we are able to buy locally. And every year, WFP targets to increase the targets of buying locally different commodities. So we encourage the farmers in South Sudan. We encourage the government to look into these gaps and provide inputs to support the agricultural sector.
High fuel prices and multiple taxes are some of the challenges the farmers point out as hindering their progress. The government says it is working to address the challenges.
Let's pause here a little and proceed on a short break. When we return, more stories ahead. We'll be right back. This edition of Global Update on NTA News 24. My name is Oyeyemi Ajayi.
I am Abdul Salam Jibril. Welcome to Global Update.
Well, welcome back. The program is still Global Update, where we discuss different issues around the globe. Our next story focuses on South Africa. Study indicates vast majority of South African population have COVID-19 antibodies. How possible can that be? You'll find out now.
As one of the worst affected countries on the continent, South Africa has been battling the pandemic since it started. A new study shows how far-reaching the impact of the pandemic has been. It reveals that nearly every South African adult now has COVID-19 antibodies. The research done by the South African National Blood Service also found that just 2% of those sampled have neither been vaccinated nor infected.
We found that 98% of our blood donors in this last iteration had antibodies to anti-spike, which means that they'd either been infected or had been vaccinated. And 87% of our donors had antibodies to anti-nuclear capsids. So that meant that 87% of our donors were definitely exposed. And so normally one thinks of blood donors as a healthy cohort, and so we may underestimate the numbers, but when you get to 98%, you really can't, it can't be underestimated. So it really is showing that pretty much everybody in the country has either had COVID or has had COVID and has been vaccinated.
The study analyzed the blood of 3,000 people and found that most have been infected at least once. Other studies have also been conducted in different phases of the pandemic. The latest results, however, show a higher level of exposure.
This is actually the third iteration of this study. It's a cross-sectional study that we've performed over the pandemic. It's the first cross-sectional study was done in March of 2021. We then did another one in November of 2021, and then this is the last one that we did in March of 2022. And each of these studies were identical in the fact that we tested a number of donors who arrived at the donor clinic. We asked them if they were willing to be part of the study, and if they gave us informed consent, we then took samples and we tested their samples.
This is the first time that blood service researchers have been able to look at two different types of antibodies to evaluate the proportion of the population that have been vaccinated but not infected. The study also notes increasing evidence that many people have been reinfected during the Omicron wave.
Report says that over 7 million Somalis need drought relief for survival.
Habiba Ali is among hundreds of farmers displaced by the devastating drought in Somalia. For the last 4 months, she and her 8 children have been living in this camp for the internally displaced in Baidoa, with no proper shelter, limited food and even water.
We urgently need mosquito nets and tents because we don't have shelter as well as clothes. Our condition is very dire. The small contributions we get during the day are not enough. We therefore call for support from the government and aid agencies.
The situation is the same across the camp, with the women and children being the most affected. To address the situation, President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud made his trip to Baidoa his first one since taking office, and he appealed for swift international humanitarian assistance. The Special Envoy for Drought Response, Abdurrahman Abshakur, has been tasked by the government with coordination of those efforts.
Baidoa is the most where the people who are most affected come and arrived recently, closer to the half of those who are displaced from drought are here in Baidoa. So Baidoa is more important than other places, and that's why we are here today, come as the first field visit to in Baidoa, and we call international community to double their effort and support Somali people in this difficult time.
UN humanitarian agencies say the coming months will be very crucial as far as response to drought is concerned, and they are calling for more funding.
7.1 million people are going to be affected by this drought situation before the end of this year. And unless we scale up and step up our response, unfortunately, many people, including at least 330,000 children, will perish before the end of the month of June. So that tells you how dire the situation is. With the limited resources that we have only been able between the months of January and April to reach 2.4 million out of all those in need of humanitarian assistance.
The main reason why Somali government is giving special attention to this part of the region as far as drought response is concerned is because this is agricultural rich region that has been feeding this country for years. But in the past 4 years, these farmers you see behind me in makeshift have not harvested due to delayed rains.
Now, elsewhere, in the wake of the newly discovered monkeypox, Chinese officials say the country has the ability to detect it in the country.
China says it puts prevention as top priority in fighting against COVID and is trying to stop the spread in an early manner. According to an authority of China's National Health Commission, the PCR testing is the golden standard to realize early prevention.
Nucleic acid testing is a mature laboratory diagnostic method that has been applied internationally. It is highly sensitive and methodologically accurate, and the result of a nucleic acid test can be seen as a gold standard of diagnosis. Also, virus mutation has no effect on the accuracy of nucleic acid tests.
The official said that mass testing should be arranged in a scientific manner based on the specific situation of each outbreak, and it should not become a normal routine if an area has no outbreaks or risk of imported cases. Meanwhile, another health official said the current PCR test has been applied in China for over 10 years, and most of the facilities and reagents have been localized. It now can detect not only the novel coronavirus, but a total of 40 official infectious pathogens in China.
A real-time PCR method for the dual targets of the monkeypox virus has been developed by the CDC Virology Institute in China. The China CDC has verified its sensitivity and specificity in Sierra Leone in Africa, so China has the ability to carry out PCR detection of monkeypox, so China can detect potentially imported monkeypox cases in a timely manner.
As for severe acute hepatitis of unknown cause in children, the official said the pathogen has not been identified, but WHO recommends pathogen screening for suspected patients on specific viruses, and China has mature and reliable PCR testing capabilities for the detection of these pathogens.
The Ethiopian government says it is committed to peaceful solutions to conflicts in Tigray region.
The AU Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo, has met with Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the leadership of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the rebel group in the country's north. Abiy Ahmed's government says it is still open to an African Union-led peace process.
The posture of the Ethiopian government still is a posture of wanting peace, wanting the normalization of people's lives that have been disrupted as a result of this conflict. So facilitating this process, as you know, any kind of peace process is long. It is it's not simple, it's a complex process. It has multi-layers as well. So at this point, the Ethiopian government is engaging with a full commitment.
But the government is now raising concerns over claims that the rebel group is preparing for another offensive.
If TPLF is amping up the war drums again, as it has been doing over the past few weeks, this is going to be at the expense of citizens, within the Tigray region and farming communities who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, who have missed around in that, and then due to the conflict in the past year and a half, have missed farming seasons as well. So this instigation of violence again would really tremendously affect the farming cycle within the region as well.
As the conflict in the country's north has dragged on, so have the humanitarian needs increased. The Prime Minister's office insists that an indefinite truce that it declared earlier in the year is allowing more aid into the Tigray region, where the UN estimates over 6 million people need humanitarian assistance. The WFP says in April and May, it delivered over 1,000 truckloads of food supplies, reaching about 350,000 people. Aid agencies say the pace of food supplies entering the Tigray region is still slow, and more needs to be done to achieve the 100 trucks per day target. The UN claims there are still blockades that have caused fuel supply shortages, making it hard for aid to reach people in parts of Tigray.
Records say 36% of Brazilians are at high risk of going hungry.
It is lunchtime. Rio de Janeiro's poor and homeless are lining up to receive a free meal from the volunteers from Project Sem Fome, or No Hunger. The project was launched right after COVID-19 hit Brazil in March 2020, offering packages of food and water to the needy. Although the pandemic has subsided, the number of people asking for food has risen.
Since we began the food drive, we've distributed around 90,000 meals, some 100 to 200 per day. But we are seeing more people showing up.
Carlos lost his job as a painter, has 2 children, and depends on the project to eat.
I
can't find work, and this project is helping us with at least 1 meal per day, and sometimes they also bring clothes. This has been going on for more than a year now.
According to a newly released study, the percentage of Brazilians unable to afford food for themselves or their families rose to a record 36% in 2021. Conducted by Brazil's Getúlio Vargas Foundation and based on Gallup World Poll data, the number of Brazilians facing food insecurity reached an all-time high since records began in 2006.
Houve aumento durante a pandemia de 4 vezes maior do que a média global.
There was a spike during the pandemic when food insecurity rose 4 times more in Brazil than in the world as a whole, affecting mainly the country's 20% poorest, amongst whom hunger has increased from 53% in 2019 to 75% in 2021.
The study also reveals that food insecurity in Brazil is nearing that of Zimbabwe, with which around 80% has some of the highest levels of hunger in the world. Scenes of homeless people living rough are becoming increasingly common in large Brazilian urban centers. And while the government's aid of around $80 per month to those facing poverty is now permanent and benefiting some 18 million families, the number of people experiencing food insecurity is much higher.
We are talking about more than 1/3 of the country's population. That 36% represents around 80 million people who are facing food insecurity. It is concerning.
As Brazil's October presidential election looms, experts believe the country's next president will need to increase and efficiently manage public spending to avoid an even deeper hunger crisis.
The Pakistani's fuel pinch of rising fuel power prices.
The government says the increase in prices of petroleum products and electricity was inevitable as it tries to strike a deal with the International Monetary Fund on an urgent basis. Reactions poured in after the government's move. I think the government has given a free hand to the petrol mafia. They are illegally hoarding petrol and will sell it to the rich people. I have heard that the prices will rise further. The middle class and the poor population has been hit the hardest.
Economists say the price increases were unavoidable adjustments and that the decision to withdraw petrol subsidy should have been taken earlier. They have warned that the worst is not over yet.
Experts say with the current situation in the international markets, the government would have to raise energy and electricity prices even further in the future.
And that's Global Update this week. Join us again some other time on NTA News 24 for another interesting edition of the program. Endeavor to always stay safe. My name is Oyeyemi Ajayi. Bye for now.